Hi, everyone, and welcome to the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and Jesus and Ugly Jody with Jody Corbet. Jody, we talked on the last podcast more about your business when you have a potential client, how you work with them, how you first meet with them, talk about strategy. But today we're going to talk about key performance indicators. So you're working with this client. What do you define as key performance indicators with your clients? So they'll say, well, I'm getting this business consulting. It's great information, but we're not implementing it enough, or we're really not seeing revenue generation. What do you look at, and how do you kind of structure it and layer it out with your clients to show what are the key performance indicators?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on again, Neil. And I'll tell you, KPIs are one of those things where any type of metrics that you're ever going to use, you better make sure it's the right thing. And so one of the things I like to do is I sit down with my clients and say, hey, what are your KPIs? How are you guys evaluating success as a company? And then I basically walk them through. There's a couple of things I do, some processes I do, where I walk them through, is this really what you want to measure? That was one of the things we had with the FBI. We would get these metrics that we would try and use to show, are we being successful at combating crime? And one of the things I would always ask is, well, where are we getting our data from? What are our measures? It's one thing if you're a company and you're making widgets. So, hey, we just want to make 20,000 widgets a month, whatever that may look like. That could be a KPI. One of the things I ask are making the widgets the most important thing, or is creating a company that's going to be able to be self-run? Because if you're a business owner, not every business owner wants to go be a multi-billion dollar company. They want to build a business just the way that God designed them and made them. They want to build it up and they want to sell it, or they want to turn it over to somebody else to run it. They don't want to be down in the weeds. They don't want to be dealing with HR and, personnel complaints and all the other stuff that goes along with it. There's other people who they run a family business and they kind of run it almost like their family. There are people who stay with these companies for 20, 30, 40 years because it becomes their identity. It becomes of who they are. Um, and then there's other people who they do want to grow a business. They want to create something that's going to leave a legacy, that's going to create wealth for their families going for years and decades into the future, that can be sustainable for them. So really, I sit down with them and I kind of walk them through, what are your objectives? What are the things you want to look at? What are the KPIs you're using to measure success? Are those the right type of KPIs? Again, going back to my bureau experience, I remember we at one point we were talking about reducing drug and gang violence, and so one of the measures they were using is getting guns off the streets or making gun arrests. And so we were getting gun statistics from the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau. And as I was going through the data, I said, wait a second, they don't get, there's several states that don't report to the ATF on guns that they've seized. Their local state folks deal with all that internally. Yeah, we know that. It's the best thing we've got, or the closest thing we've got. I'm like, well, okay, but if you're using that as a metrics or a measure, the closest we've got isn't really accurate. We want to be able to show true and good information. So that's the other thing I like to do, is sit down with clients and go over their KPIs of what makes them successful for those who utilize that service with me.
No doubt. And that's going over that. So what do you, so you said that basically you gave multiple ways you're looking at KPIs and key performances based on each client. It's almost like you tailor things to look at what those key performance indicators, what does the client really want? Not what you're looking at. You're looking at the bottom line, what they want. Some it's revenue, some it's improve employees, hiring. Others it could be operations. You see a gamut of different things, right?
Well, and to your point, if you're trying to build a company that you just want to build up to a specific point in order to sell it, how you create your culture in your company, the leaders you put into the company, how you're tracking information. It's going to look very differently than if you're trying to build a long-term wealth generating institution that's going to benefit your family's legacy, for decades to come. Because in that instance, you daggone better well define your culture. You better put the right leaders in place that are going to be manifesting and encouraging that culture. You better understand what it is you're trying to do, because this isn't going to be somebody else's problem. It's you have to build, we have to build something for you, tailor-made, that's going to help create a culture, an environment, a company that you're going to be proud of and continuing to lead in 20 and 30 years. That type of strategy is different than I'm just going to build something up that I'm going to sell in the next 18 to 24 months. Um, so that's one of the things I sit down with clients and really work with them on kind of processing through what that could look like.
Yeah, and that process is a pretty crazy thing. It sounds like, because you're looking at things in so many different aspects. What do you think is the biggest way you look at drive? So you're looking at a client, you know their goals, but are you able to kind of identify things that really they might be overlooking?
Well, I think it's not overlooking. I think what happens a lot of times is, especially for small and medium-sized business owners, they have built this thing from the ground up. They have been down slogging in the weeds for extended periods of time, trying to get this business up and going, looking for new leads, doing business development, having to make sure that they're compliant with all of the, state and federal regulations that may be around their whatever industry it is that they're in. Um, and because they've been so down in the weeds and the minutia, it's hard for them to see some strategic pieces. I find oftentimes with clients when I sit down and talk with them as well, especially with CEOs, there's stuff that they're aware of that may not be common knowledge to the rest of the team. And so I try and remind them like, hey, remember, just because you know something doesn't mean the whole team knows it. So if there's been some lessons learned that you've developed over the years of doing what you've been doing, you know, let's try and get that out to folks. Let's do some educational, brown bag lunch discussions, or bringing it up at our weekly meetings. Kind of a fun nugget for the day, and then you can tell them some of the experiences you've had in building the business that you've run into challenges or issues, so that they don't run into the same things coming in behind you, and they just don't know because you haven't told them yet. So knowledge transfer is a big thing that we focus on. Especially if they have employees who have institutional knowledge that the CEO, don't have or COO don't have, because that's one thing I've seen. Companies have had folks leave, and entire elements of their business line have gone under because that person was the one running everything, and they didn't think to connect with them and to get all of the, hey, how are you developing these clients? How are you getting these contacts? Where are you at on your presentations for business development? And so the person leaves and they literally have nothing but a bunch of emails and the things that they have on their hard drive that was left when they, walked away. So trying to help get them towards a sustainable building business model, to what their goals are.
Especially, let's talk of the FBI. How many people did you work with on a regular basis? Now, looking at organizations where you're working with some big number of employees, how have you transitioned in that way to look at the FBI, where you have a specific amount of people that you worked with a regular day, to now a larger organization and looking at that whole infrastructure and be able to tailor it to that business while your experience in the FBI for X amount of years?
Yeah. So for the FBI, it's a lot different, right? Because the FBI is very, very broken down. It's a paramilitary organization, so there's a very clear hierarchy, delineated hierarchy. So different people have different responsibilities within the FBI. And as I mentioned before, there's many different fiefdoms within the FBI and any government and really even corporate organization. So I think one of the big things, my takeaway as far as leading in the FBI compared to leading in private sector, is this: servant leadership is still servant leadership. And some people do really, really well with smaller teams. And as you move them up, they don't do as well because they don't have the personal connectivity that makes them the leader that they are. Other leaders they're great at higher level positions because they don't have to deal with the people and the issues and the problems that comes with leadership sometimes. Um, so really trying to find the right individuals and getting them in the right positions. You wouldn't want an engineering mindset, someone who thinks like an engineer over your HR department necessarily. You want somebody who's more empathetic, caring, compassionate over the HR component because you're caring for your people. Whereas an engineering mindset, you would want them over things like research and development or, technological advancements or business processes, things like that. So that's one of the things I've learned in kind of transitioning out of government is making sure you've got the right folks. And I think I mentioned before, like I think the NSA does a great job of this. They've got some really, really sharp people up there who are doing some phenomenal work, but you would never want them leading another human being because that's just not how what they're gifted in. And they do that well. The Bureau, I think, is getting going in that direction, where they're being able to look for people. But unfortunately, too, with the government, I think a lot of times they view us all just cookie cutter that can be replaced very easily. A special agent is a special agent is a special agent. And I think we're starting to realize, no, there's actually some very talented people here who are doing things that we can't just replace. So,
So how the success of retiring from the FBI to be able then to work with these organizations, they see your vision, they understand how powerful it is, and putting the right KPIs in place leads like how did that's the amazing part of how you've been able to transition from this to this with such success so far and really showing people what you really can do for them.
well, I'd like to tell you it's as simple as that, but it's not. CEOs are human beings just like everybody else. And even though I can come in and I can explain to them a strategic vision and where we can generate new revenue streams and ways we can help to build their business, not every CEO is gifted with the gift of strategy. And that's okay. Um,
Really, see, I wouldn't know that. What do you see CEOs? And that would be another great topic for a podcast is what background does some of these CEOs come from?
Well, I mean, again, a CEO they're like me. They could come from any background, right? I mean, there's some that have had military experience, there's some that haven't, there's some that have worked in the government, there's some that haven't, there's some that have just done sales their whole lives. There's some that have just done nothing but research or developing 0 days or whatever it is that they're doing. And so they typically what I find is there's a CEO who's got a gift skill set that they were able to come up with something that nobody else thought about, or what they're doing is better than what anybody else is doing. Those are the kind of clients that I like to work with and support. But that doesn't mean that they're good at all the other things that go into building a business. So being good at a specific thing, whatever that task or skill set may be, is awesome. But it doesn't mean you're going to be able to lead a business. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to do business development, or that you even have the network to get your technology in front of the right people, whether it's in the government or defense contractors or corporate clients. And so that's where I feel like my skill set comes in, where I can show them, hey, these are some things I can do to help you. These are some relationships I got that I can introduce you to, and come in and share what you're doing. But not every CEO can look and think strategically. And that's why
Uh,
I only do
Interesting. Yeah,
I only
and
do year contracts, because I found that it's sometimes at the end of that year, I've had CEOs say, "Hey, thanks, but no thanks." I've had others say, "We're going to pay you more money than we paid you last year because of what you've done, and we want to keep you on." And then there's some that I look at and say, "Hey, listen, I don't really feel like I'm bringing a lot of value add because I'm giving you a lot of stuff and you're not implementing any of it, which is up to you as a CEO. But I want to work with somebody who wants to grow and build their business. I'm not, I don't want you to pay me just to hear me talk to you." So.
interesting. Uh, and I find this fascinating of defining what the best CEOs are, right? And looking at what their roles are. Some of them are really good in sales and marketing, right? That are CEOs. Others are really good in infrastructure and operations. They sometimes the founder, you work with a lot of founder CEOs, which at one point are going to get themselves out of the way as the founder and hire a better CEO.
They should. Doesn't mean they will.
But but the problem is that founder still has to be there and then use whatever their gifts are. If it's marketing and sales, if it's operations, if it's technology, infrastructure, IT, whatever that area is, then find greater people to hire in those other positions. And what management is today in any C suite position is totally different than it was a year ago. And that's where you have to continue to learn.
Well, and I'd even throw out with all the things you just listed, Neil, which are all very great and valid points. Think about the industry. Who you'd want as a CEO over a health care or a hospital network is going to be different than the type of person you'd want as a CEO over an oil and gas company, or different than a CEO over a defense contractor. So even just the industry itself, the type of CEO you would want would be very different because of the type of individual, the type of gift skill sets that you would want that CEO to possess. Because if you're dealing with somebody's healthcare, you don't want an engineering mindset that's going to be looking at dollars and bottom cents, dollars and cents is the bottom line. You want somebody who's going to be caring for the individuals and the human beings that are in their care. If you're a CEO of a church, right, a pastor of a church, you're going to be needing to have a gift skill set that's different. You're not necessarily looking to make money. You're looking to care for the people in your congregation and around you. Whereas if you're a defense contractor, yeah, you got to make money, but you also have to produce products that are being able to help the men and women either in law enforcement or the intelligence community or Department of War, whatever the case may be that you're servicing, and getting them the equipment and the things they need to keep them on the front edge and keep them safe while they're out there protecting us.
No
So
doubt. Yeah.
again, the industry itself can dictate the type of CEO you want.
And what do you think of the best CEOs?
Well, the same thing I'm going to tell you every single time, which is the servant leaders, the people who
Okay.
are transformational leaders in an organization who put their employees first. Because when you make your people successful, the vast majority of people are going to respond positively to that, and they're going to take a vested interest in helping you grow and build your business.
Are there companies you study that are on the market that people know of that do the great job with a servant leader as a CEO?
I don't know if I would say as a servant leader, I would say one of the things that I've done that I've studied a lot is, and I think I mentioned before, when we talk about culture and creating a culture that drives excellence. The two best organizations that I've been able to research and find are the United States Marine Corps and Netflix. Those two companies drive a culture and command it unlike any I've seen. There may be others, but not. Let me rephrase that. Those are tremendously large organizations compared to most companies, and yet they're still able to control their culture. Whereas I have other clients, and even at the FBI, we didn't control our culture. We had a culture, but we didn't control it. The vast majority of government and companies do not control their culture. Every organization has a culture, but it's typically not guided.
All right. Best place people can connect with you. Where can they go?
LinkedIn, or through my website at sls.consulting.
All right. That was the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and Jesus and Ugly Jody. Guys, take care.